worms, and more worms. And there's a worm behind you, Andy. I don't know if it's eating your hat.
Who are you? What do you want?
I think the worm ate his brain, guys. Sorry. Well, what can we say? He was invisible in the first place.
You see how it's coming into the ear? Look at that. See, right through there, coming out the other side. Oh my God! It's like.
Well, they do like soft gray material, Andy. So you better watch out.
So everybody, hi everybody. How are you doing? So today I'm going to be talking to you about one of my favorite subjects. That's actually worm farming. Hi, Mad Dog. So it's not so much just about worms, but it's actually worm farming. Okay, because I think that's the ideal scenario that I like to. And as a matter of fact, in my home now, I moved my worm farm from one place back to here again. This is the first time I'm in this place. See, so I moved maybe four times in 1 year. So the worms farms have been moving with me, and worm farms are not very good at moving. They get dizzy. They don't like looking out, see trees going by. Not their favorite thing.
Now they get car sick. Come on, Andy.
So right now I have soil that I brought over with me from the last worm farm, which I know has a lot of worm eggs in it. There, maybe a lot of worms may have died because it's really rained a lot, super wet. You can't soak the worms in it; they drown. Plus,
you have to have a lot of oxygen for worms to survive in a wet environment.
Exactly. Plus, their natural enemies are ants, so the ants will invade your worm farm and eat them because they're meat eaters. So having a worm farm. What?
They steal the eggs.
I don't know if they steal the earthworm eggs.
Yes. They pack just like any kind of a larvae that the ants will eat. They'll go after that, so they'll grab the egg and take it out, and that's their protein for the day.
That's interesting. All the time I've been working in worm farms, I don't remember seeing eggs. I remember seeing the worms. Are the eggs like black, or are they like invisible, or are they clear? Good afternoon, good evening, good day. What is? I didn't know earthworm had eggs. I thought they maybe had baby worms. They just produce worms.
Well, right? They produce worms, and an egg can carry 3 to 7 worms in it. And what happens is worms are both sexes, right? Yeah. So they mate, and that crease around them that you see is where the eggs will form, and they'll literally shed that off of their body as it matures. And if it's red wigglers, it'll start out a light color and move up into the red, but they're just little round cocoons. And 21 days after that, the worm cocoon, the worms will be born, basically, come out of their cocoon, 3 to 7 worms.
So the cocoon, is that what you're saying? It's the same as the eggs?
That is the egg.
That is the eggs, the cocoon. So basically, when they mate, the cocoon attaches to their body, right?
Well, let me see that picture that's behind you. Up in here, I don't know if you can see you probably can't see my mouse, but there's a larger image. Let me just grab.
Can you see my mouse?
No.
You can't see. We can't see each other's mouses. Oh my God, this is horrible.
Oh, I know it's horrible. Let me grab an image and I'll just bring it up here. Just give me a second, guys. Let me share my screen. Okay, so here's a good picture. I don't know if I can blow it up, but right here, you see that larger section? That is where they breed, and this becomes is where the eggs are developed by the worm, and then this will slowly work itself off and be deposited in behind. The ends will close up, and then you'll have a worm cocoon or a worm egg. And in 21 days, as I said, that's when
Is that the same for all types of worms?
As far as I understand it, it is.
And because what I find interesting is I never really thought about it because I always thought, well, they multiply. Because when
Yeah.
I buy 1,000 worms, next thing you know, I got 20 or 30,000 worms.
Yeah.
I always thought that they would sort of like split or do something where there'd be more worms rather than eggs, because I never really see eggs all the time. I'm handling the soil and doing layers
Mhm.
and stuff and holding the worms up. I never really see it in the soil. But I know there are eggs in there because I know that if I put the soil that I have now and put it back in the conditions that's right for the worms, in other words, I would layer them with different types of things that would be very good for a worm farm, which I'll go over with. But if I reset up those conditions right, the worms will hatch.
And see, this is the little worm egg right
Yeah,
here, and
I never see those little guys in the soil, and yet I
yeah.
see more worms. So I
Well,
have to. You think they're dirty because they're in the soil and they're not like that clear? Maybe they're really dark.
they can get dark just before, but unless you're handling your worms all the time, and worms will self-regulate. If you have a box that's, say, 2 foot by 1 foot, you can only have so many worms in there. They
Right,
will self-regulate their population.
right,
Just when the old ones die off, you'll have
right,
a few new ones come in. Um, and if you want to do worm breeding, then you change the environment to encourage them to mate, and that's actually around 90% water content in the substrate. You use a different substrate, you use a different feeding routine for breeding worms. But if you're just worm farming, then as long as your worms are in there happy and healthy, and they're consuming what you're giving them, then you're golden, my friend. You got golden eggs when you need them, and only when you need them.
well, that's the whole thing because I don't really worry. It's like cooking.
Yep.
So I know that, for example, the worm farms, where was that before, in the previous place before, the last three places, it was very difficult to keep the worms alive because when you have a worm farm, you literally in your garden and in the worm, dealing with the worms every day. You
Mhm.
just can't go away for a few days. You come back and go, oh, what happened now?
Well, it depends on how you're setting things up. Like, there's a feeding cycle. If you're using just throwing in your old vegetables and stuff, you can get away with feeding enough where it's going to last for a week, 10 days, 3 weeks. It's just overfeeding is an issue. You need to let that have broken down before you feed more, because that can cause problems as well if you have too much food in there. So worms are a fascinating creature, and what they give us, whether it's the worm castings or the leachate, and you mainly, I believe, use the leachate, Andy, for your mixes. They're phenomenal creature to party with, man.
I learned from experience, just like treating the garden, just like treating the vegetable garden every day. I don't like going away. I know that, for example, I have basically a small version of the worm farm now. It's mainly little trays I had with me because I always want to get some juice. So it's a tinier version than the big cattle trough that I have, and
Mhm.
I learned to I can feed it some coffee grinds. I can feed it some whatever it likes, but it doesn't. I can't do it every day. So I would go in there maybe once or every few days, once a week at the most probably, and then
Yeah.
feed it rather than just keep dumping it in there. Because if you
Mhm.
do that, then you will kill them for sure. And that's what's happening in a lot of
Yeah.
these places. People don't understand that there's a big difference between having worms to do a worm farm so that you can use the leachate as opposed to vermiculture, which
Yeah.
basically is you're constantly feeding the worms, giving them the food they want. They process it. You have a system set up that they take it, they process it, and you continue it on to the next place where it has to go to, and that's using the worms to break everything down for you, and you probably get. I'm not. I haven't really done that system before, uh, but I would think that if you're doing it properly, you're going to get a lot of leachate from it as well.
Yeah. Well, and then it's the objective that you want. Like I've watched guys have a huge worm farms, like we're talking hundreds of thousands of worms in their bin, and they're producing leachate because that's what they want. Then you have other people that go, like if that stuff goes bad and you get the wrong biology in it, you're in trouble. Use the worm castings and do that, and then you've got another whole group that is actually starting with a biologically complete compost, using that as the worm bedding, adding the worms then into the compost and having them make the castings out of compost, and they're calling it vermicompost. And that's a whole nother level, because you've got all the biology from that living compost you've just made. The worms just increase the biology by running that through their system and adding their biology into the mix. And it's a whole new level. And then using that as an extract, take a little bit of it, put it in water and mix it, strip the biology off, and you've got that much more of a diverse biology in that than in pretty much anything else that you can create.
In Florida, when I start, one of the few times, so I was there for I don't know since the well, I grew up in Florida. I was trying, and when I got out of the service, it was 79. I got married in 78. So and roughly around 78, 7 or so around there, I was making lots and lots of compost, and one of the sources was really actually a mushroom farm. So it was mushroom compost, which was already biologically super alive.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so I would use that as a basis to inoculate with the worms, and then use that mixture as part of a tea that I would make. And so I also end up with lots of compost because I only needed a small amount of the worms. There's two ways to make the lychees from, but one that I do, but one of them would be like you rinse out the farm itself with a little bit of pure clean water, and the water percolates through, and you use that. There are other ways that you can make the lychees, because you can make it directly from the soil. You can take some of the soil out and make a liquid from that. You'd be surprised how many times that will keep working, because it's really very rich with the microbes and very rich with the minerals.
Yes, I do it all the time, Andy.
incredibly rich, right? And so here in my garden, what I'm doing now, it's because I brought the worm farm over. There's a big pile of the soil in there, and so I'm starting to get. What I'm doing is I'm buying. Let's see. It's not cellophane, but it's basically a wrap. It's like a food wrap that you wrap it. So I want to get a chunk of the soil, wrap it up,
Okay.
wrap them up, so that like I would seal them, right, and put them in. I have a chest, so I'm gonna put a few of them in the chest. What that does is that allows me to get to them later. They don't dry up, and I could use them down the road, just say a few months down the road, take them out again and use them again. But and then the batch that I have, if I had a big operation, see what I need to do is I started making liquids from this stuff, because the more liquids that I make, the more I can spray. I find that I really I have a 100-gallon sprayer, and I would love to have 100 gallons of as strong as possible of the liquid biology that I can. Ideally, it would be the way I do it now is I get a gallon of my worm juice. I call it worm juice.
Yeah.
You guys call it leachate, worm leachate, but I like worm juice.
Okay.
I like that. Yeah, I like calling it that. It's more tasty, and people, I drink worm juice. I'm thinking along those lines. But anyway, so I take a gallon of the worm juice. Sometimes I take 2.5 gallons. It depends on how much they produce, because I've learned that if you water them too much, they'll die. But if you don't water them at all, they'll dry out. So
Yeah.
it's a water process too, and the more of them that there are, the more that start producing, the more liquid they produce. But I had over 150,000 of them at one time in the cattle troughs, which is very interesting amount because I would get 40,000. You can buy it from Amazon, 40,000. When I make mashed potatoes, the reason we did the more than were. Oh yeah, the mashed potatoes, they really like that.
Yeah.
I have to do something like that too. I don't really have if I had a farm, I would have a barn, and in the barn I would have a whole worm thing going on. You'd be surprised how much you could do on a farm with different types. But to me, the worm juice alone, well, there's two types of liquids that I use, and one of the things I'm going to set up here is start making compost, and so the compost I already found a nice source of mushroom compost, so I'm going to be using that as a base, and then I'm going to get some earthworm castings. I have another source of earthworm castings at a reasonable price, and then another source of some clean soil. I'm going to blend them together. I'm going to be dumping a bunch of other stuff into it, mixing them all up. We'll call it a show, and that's what I'm going to be calling my compost. And my compost is really I was thinking of giving it a name for it because it's really like Band-Aid for the soil, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of like wound soil healing. That's what I call soil healing, but wound healing, you have to put a bandage on it. Bandage for the soil, but it's not really a bandage because the bandage doesn't really heal the problem. So it's more like a poultice for the soil.
Yes. Yeah. Mother Nature abhors bare soil,
It's a poultice for the soil. And so that's where I like using it on my property. But the main problem I have is when I figured out a way to spread the biology on people's property faster than most people do, and that's having a spraying rig. You'd be surprised how fast you can spread it out, especially if you get a source. Like, for example, what I do with a lot of my customers, and I haven't done this in a while because normally I would sell them my own compost, because you and I know that the best compost in the world is the compost that you make. Right?
The best vegetables that you grow, Andy, are the vegetables that you grow on your property. You know that,
right? And so I would tend to make the best compost because that's what if you're a good farmer, you will make the best compost. There's no brainer. Either that, you have a cousin or somebody next door that makes the best compost. You got a really good deal with him or her, right?
Well, family discount. I mean, come on.
But what I want to really do, so what I've learned is that if I can start adding this compost into the soil, people's properties, and if I started to let it establish a way for the biology to start growing, because I've learned that just spraying the microbes doesn't work. You have to have some kind of foundation, little condos for everybody to move in.
Organic material, and that's the beauty of being able to spread the compost, on people's properties. But that's a large volume of quality compost.
Right. So what I've learned to do is to set up little colonies throughout the property. So first of all, you can look at a property and say, okay, that's a good spot right there, because it's really mellow. It gets the right amount of light, the right amount of sun, and it's no reason for something to be growing there, as opposed to look at this hard rock place right here. And so you want to pick a spot that has like in my house, you're right in front of the house, and I told you about this little fairy island of plants, and right in there they have mycelium growing, and it's very, very, very happy, and so I can work with that. And that's what we want to do on people's property. We want to establish a little metropolitan metropolis for the biology to live in.
Yep.
Right. And so you have it's like a city. They'll have so many different type of people. You have so many different type of microbes and biology, bacteria, all living and they all have a function to do, but they need the structure to work from. And so
Yep.
I've learned that if you make you have to make really, really good compost, and you also have to make do the correct thing about the worm juice, the worm farm. You have to have a really good worm farm going. You have those two things going together, and in terms of doing a business, this is all you really need to do so what I do is people don't know, but I do a natural spraying business. I go out to people's properties, I spray their property. All you need, the best compost in the world, the best worm farm in the world. You do that, and you'll find that because your compost, if it's the best compost in the world, we'll have all the trace minerals. We'll have a wide range of microbes and biology in it, right? And in the right stage, that the more microbes will love it if it was in the soil, because you want to put it in the soil, blend it in with your local soil, and then start inoculating it with the worm juice. And you want the worm juice on a regular basis. One of the things I learned is when I do that at people's places is that you can't just go dig a hole and bring some compost, put it in the hole, and then come by on a regular basis and throw some microbes in there. Doesn't really work that way. So the idea with having established a microbial colony has to be expanded to the point where you actually have to look at the meridians, the lines of energy on the property, and see where's it all meeting at, right? If it meets at a certain place, you're going to go, holy cow, because that's also the place where the biology naturally follows the lines of energy. The biology they need, they don't need. They just have evolved with this. They will follow all the lines of energy. They actually create the lines of energy in the soil. Right, they create the line of energy, how it flows from one part of the property to another part of the property. So it's important to understand how the energies flows, and you want to then, because ideally what you're trying to do is you're trying to reestablish the wiring of the soil. You're trying to reestablish the wiring of the soil that's been damaged. So the way the system is worked and the way it transmits energy throughout the soil can easily be damaged. That's why it's not good to roll the tilt. That's what it does when you roll the tilt, right? Or it could be damaged.
Well, the thing is, Andy, now there are cases, and like I'm more no-till mindset, but there are cases, and you run into them all the time, where the soil is so bad, it's not soil, it's dirt, and it's so compacted that tillage makes sense to break it up because there's no life in it, to be able to get the life into it, because you got to get oxygen down in there a little bit too.
Right. So it's what I mean by no rototill is like you don't do that year after year after year after year after year after year after year. It's understanding, and like here, when outside, if I had it was a bigger in a farm environment, I would try to rototill that hard clay, whatever it is there, try to break it up, bring in more soil, bring more organic matter, start to build it up, turn it all over so that because otherwise, if you just lay it down on top, it's like laying something on rock. It may take your lifetime before it does anything to the. You can also tilt the top layer without going to the side. Well, there are different layers of the soil. We had talked about that before. So you really don't want to go down too many different layers. You want to stick to the top layer.
You don't want to get down into those beautiful clumps of life that exist there that, everybody loves to go, oh, look at this soil. It's so clumpy and nice. And these aggregates. Oh, and then they go shatter. And there's the universe of the biology. There was their whole existence, their whole civilization. And you just powdered it. But they'll start again. Hey, they grow faster than we do.
And so you want to, especially if if it's just been decaying to the point there's really nothing there, and so you do want to break it up a little bit and start adding more organic matter and slowly build it back up again. One of the things that's it's a little bit different in nature, because what we do is like I'm basically taking my backyard and turning it into a highly vegetative gardening state, which is like not a normal state for it to be in.
Not in
right?
Malibu, but Andy, before we go back, I want to drag it back just for a
Oh,
moment.
bring it back.
Perpetual was talking about the feed that you're giving worms, and where he doesn't eat a lot of vegetables, doesn't have that type of waste. I would suggest Perpetual. You're growing plants. There's the green waste. It doesn't matter if it's a weed, and sometimes the weeds are better. That is, if they're growing on your property, that's what your property is calling for. That's what Mother Nature has sprouted that weed for a reason. Take that, put it in your worm bin for them to compost if you're having problems. And yes, if you grind the food, the smaller you make it, the easier it is for the biology to start eating it, breaking it down. And it's the worms are eating biology. They're not eating the banana. They're eating the biology that's eating the banana.
So
What do you feed your worms, Andy?
where do I start? Because I was following you, and then I lost it in the second part, and the third part came along, and I forgot what the first and second part was all about, and then I forgot your name. I have no idea who you are or anything anymore. But the basics that I got out of it that I remember is that yeah. So if you're eating vegetables, like right now, all I can give the worms or be some different kinds of greens that I have growing here for starters. Because
Yeah.
when I should have some bok choys. I gave them a little bit of bok choys. Uh, I have I don't have any cauliflower. I have some arugula, so I give them some arugula. And
Are
then I
you
have,
grinding it up, Andy, or are you feeding like
well,
whole leaf or?
here's the whole thing about it. So uh, I don't have one now, but I definitely am going to get a nice blender, and I do
Oh,
have one. I do have a grinder. It's a basically as a top on it. You throw your onions in, and it spins and grinds it, shreds it up. It's a mixer. It's a food mixer, food processor. It grinds. It has a blade, and you throw your stuff in there. And it grinds them all up into smaller pieces like onions and potatoes. You
yeah,
know what that
yeah,
is, right?
yeah, like
So
a magic bullet or something like that, or a food processor.
yeah, so
Yeah.
if you can so I've learned by adding it, doing that, a little bit of water, and then pouring it giving it to the worms or to the soil. That works really good, really easy. Well, so it doesn't become food for the creatures, the rats and creatures like that, because if you.
Yeah.
I learned the hard way. You don't want to be dumping food around or burying. I thought, well, maybe I should just bury it, but that doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So but the process is the same. So I can also do that. You can also do that for your worm farms. So since you have to add a little bit of water to it, that water could be highly processed. It could be ground up, whatever food that you can run and turn into a liquid. Plus, also at the same time, I have all this stuff that I'm turning into my local liquid, which I can also add to the worms as well, through
Mm-hmm.
by soaking it. The different weeds. What I've been doing is so the different weeds that I make a liquid from. That's easy. That's exactly what I'll be watering the worms with, which already is the biology is coming from there. And at the same time, I'll be watering the property with the biology coming from the worm. So you're going to see this cycle, this circle happening.
Explosion of biology, my friend, an explosion.
It'll be a nice big circle happening, and pretty soon. Then one of the things about having so in terms of food, I've learned that there are some really basic things that they like to eat. First of all, they're not very good at eating meat. They don't process meat too well. They don't process bones. It takes you forever for them to go bones. They do not eat spoiled food. If food is rotten, they'll die if they try to eat that stuff. They're not very good at herbs that are, if you think of herbs, oregano, spices, uh, those things, they won't like that. And of course, they can't handle if you're gonna. They can't handle toxins. So, for example, if you're using city water, the drinking water, your sink water to do the worms, you'll probably kill them because there's so much stuff in the water,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then but mainly but mainly I'm trying to read. I try to read what they're going through over there. They have a little thing going on. Silly's very good at talking to all these different
Oh,
folks.
well, I'll bring up Perpetual's point here. He's trying to feed his worm bin mulched grass, so in the bag clippings, and it's turning into mush and slimy. You can take that and mix it in with like a worm chow mixture you can create yourself. There's lots of recipes. Just look up worm chow. I've got 5 or 6 recipes for it here, but it's just like chicken scratch, some calcium, stuff like that. Then you could take that and mix it together, make more of a paste, and then feed that to your worms. It won't heat up as much, or it shouldn't. And try that to use that, or just freeze it, mix it up with some coffee grounds or something like that. It's the greens and browns. And you're dealing with what Leighton calls GOM, ground up organic material, and it does really hard for it to break down. So you can compost it first, feed the finished compost to the worms, and then you're going to get vermicat compost, and that's even the next level, right? Sorry, Andy, I had to do
that. I lost it back there when because I was thinking about the in terms of what you feed them, and somewhere along my path, I have made a wide variety of different food for them. But fortunately, I've learned that I have a wide range. Being a vegetarian, I already have a wide range of food that I can go through, especially here now. And that's perfect worm food then, because they love this kind of stuff. They love greens. They love vegetables. I specifically, when I first start them, I also make sure that they get something. So right now, in the building of my worm farm, I have some type of several different types of carbon that I'm introducing to the worm farm. I'm also since I have access to all this wood from the ocean. It's nice and clean. It's been shaped, and some of it is very good. But in the process of using it, I'm making this a dust, the sawdust. And so I plus I have a lot. I'm finding that this stuff is really decomposing very, very fast. And so it's real easy to cut up in smaller pieces and feed the worms that, because they will break that down. They love the carbon. They love newspapers. Most newspapers are clean. They don't have lead. One of the things about giving them papers, don't never give them if they have a color in them, because I usually use lead based.
Right. Actually, I don't think they're allowed to legally use lead in the ink anymore. But
they stop
the filmy coating, then you don't want to use that, because that's like a wax. It's an oil-based product.
One of the things I feed my worms, since I have coffee and I do eggs a lot, I 4 eggs in the morning. I take the shells. I have a really nice motor and pistol. Put the eggshells in there. Take the coffee grounds. Put the coffee grounds in with the eggshell. Crush the whole thing up so it looks really kind of weird. And I can feed the worms that. They really love that. I go there the next day, and it's like they're like, "Hey, that stuff was really good."
And it's pH neutral. Coffee grounds are pH neutral. Just got to make sure that you're adding lots of carbon. That was one thing that I found along the way, is people were talking about too much coffee grounds without adding something like cardboard, and that would cause some later issues. So that was just the mix of carbon that you're talking about is fantastic, Andy.
Because what you don't want is to lower the pH too much. The coffee grinds, if it's just used strictly, will be lower the pH way too much. It will be way past the sixth level. It could be 5.9, 5.8. You don't want to go down there. You don't even want to go anywhere near 6 pH. And if you're not careful, if you just use a lot of that coffee grinds, that will change the pH of the soil, and it will inhibit the kind of microbes that you want. And that's always the issue. There aren't too many places here in California, in Malibu. How much is too much coffee? Well, you don't want. Perpetual says, "How much is too much coffee?" I am assuming you're talking about the mixtures that you give the worms. And again, it really depends on how many worms you have. If you have
How
lots
many
and lots
worms
of
and how much cardboard you're adding in with it, right? It
exactly
should be
right.
at
So
least 50-50.
you always want to have. So when I'm making my layers, I rotate between. So what I've learned from that, a lot of the cardboards now, like in moving and in boxes, they'll say it's been made from plants and recycled, no inks, stuff like that. You want to look at it because there still are some stuff out there that's very toxic. You don't want to use it if they have the plastic tape on them, or they have all kinds of weird labels on them. So you want to take those off. A lot of times, what I do is I go to let's see, a food place like Ralph's and something like that, and I go in the back and I ask to see what you're throwing out. You'll find a lot of this stuff is recycled, and it's very easy to use. So I'll use those, and then I slice them up into little strips, and so I have it's easy to get that because the other thing I use is and when I go shopping, I deliberately do not, and this is bad. I don't know if I should tell you guys. No, I'm not going to tell you because I'll be on tape, and then you'll say, "Look, my God, look what he did." Power paper shredder. I know a paper shredder stopped working. That's too bad. But one of the ways I love is when I go shopping, I ask for paper bags, and the paper bags are very, very nice. They're clean. They're recycled, and the worms love them. All you have to do is cut them up into strips. Right, and so then I also alternate with the leaves, and the leaves you want them on the dry side. There's your carbon, and you do not want to do like some friends of mine have done. Put a layer of they make their worm farm and put a layer of grass clippings in there. Every time they did grasses, they would put it in there. So you know what happened.
Yeah, it turns like what Perpetual was saying. It turns to slime, and yeah, it's really bad. Yeah.
Right. And you kill the end result. You killed the worms.
Well, yeah, you're cutting off oxygen supply too because of how tight the
So
biology or
the best way to deal with grass clippings, first of all, is if it's your grass clippings. I mean, it's your grass. I'm not talking about I'm talking about your lawn, and you do your lawn organically. You're feeding it really well, very rich. All that good stuff is in there, and you want to use the grass clippings. The best way to use is to dry it out. The best way to dry it out, you get it's like a wire mesh, like a circle. You fill it in with your grass clippings, let it dry out. It'll just dry right out. You don't do it in a tumbler because and air will flow through it within a few weeks. It dries out. And if you do it correctly, because you know how it depends how often you cut your grass and all that stuff, you can literally fill the whole thing up and then set up another one and let that whole pile dry out. It'll dry out to where you can take that and run it through, or you can run it through your
Are you
compost
fluffing it up on a regular basis,
Yeah,
Andy, so
right,
that it's
right.
not getting all wet? Yeah.
Right. You get a pitchfork and turn it over, or a little pitchfork will do it. Turn it over, aerate it a little bit, but usually it'll breathe through. What I do is I put it on. I get a pallet, and I put a wire on the bottom. Put the wire on like that, so it's sitting on the pallet. It breathes right straight through it. It's no good if it gets wet. If it gets wet, it's a different thing entirely. Right. You have to then deal with it. What happened? I mean, in one room I've been Harvard Wiggler with my another bin.
Okay, I'll bring it back up.
Yeah, so one worm bin, I harvest wrigglers, processing manure. In another bin, I have Indian blues and tiger working vegetables and fruit scrap. Another bin with Indian blue, tiger red wriggler doing grain. And what are you doing, Banana? Are you selling a product? Or are you just like one of those crazy guys that likes worms? Or you have like fresh worms to eat? Or what is it that you do? You're using the liquid to supply? Because it seems like you're having a really good time. And I would love to know if this is your business or if you're just, worms are us kind of thing, you're right. But it's really cool that you can do that. And, I would love to be on a farm where part of my business would be harvesting and using the worms. I've learned that any aspects of the worms are one of the easiest, one of the most nutritionally rich of all the different. I like to call it animal. Is a worm an animal?
Yeah, I would believe so, but don't quote me on that. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I know. I've always said it's an animal, so it's the smallest animal that you can get your hands on. That there's two sources of the rest of the best animal manure on the planet at the moment, and that would be the worms and the elephant. Those are the
Yes.
two sources of
Yeah.
the best manure. They both have the same process that's going through their stomach, and this process. It's just all about the stomach. If you do a study of biodynamics, he talks all about the stomach. One of his
Gut
favorite
biology. The gut biology.
and,
Yes.
and the biology that works the best right now in terms of because the worms and the elephants are good biology. The best biology comes from cows, whether it be males or females. I guess males would be bulls and cows are females, right? Right?
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
And that has the best biology in terms of producing the perfect type of bacteria, microbes and so forth that you want for this particular process of transferring minerals and stuff. Go ahead, Ken.
Well,
I know
just
you
look.
see a little spark
I
in
think
your eye.
cows, Andy, are cows the only ones with two stomachs? So, the food goes in the first one, gets fermented, they pull it back up, chew their cud, and put it into the second one. Are they? I don't know if they're the only animal that does that.
I really don't know, but I do know that the cow is the only one that produces this particular setup. But so if you have
Okay.
cow manure in your compost and whatever way you're using it, you're not going to be having any kind of trace mineral deficiency provided. Well, that's a little two things going on there because normally, right, in the way we would live 1,000 years ago, you don't have to supply trace minerals because it's always there. Mother Nature recycled everything, and the worms
Yeah.
were doing their thing, and you just ate the food, and the food would
Yeah.
have everything in there. And so, but now, and I know that certain places they're still rich. Certain places you can go there, you don't have to do anything, just make sure the biology's there, and then eat the food, grow it, and eat it. But there are lots of other places, and when I talk about other places, I'm basically talking about some owner's property. There's nothing on there. I was thinking about the other day. You know what they do when you go build a house? You scrape away the top layer of soil. You dump construction sand on. You build your house. Put a little bit of soil back in again. That's your place.
Yeah.
So they took away the biology, sterilized
All the
everything,
organic matter.
put some dead soil back again, and planted stuff, and that's it.
Yeah.
So that's what you got to work with, right? So that's what you got to work with. So it's a process. It's not impossible to increase the biology. You just have to. So a lot of times you also have to work with your neighbors because if you're doing something that to make this come back to life, and your neighbors around you are doing the opposite, just killing everything, it will eventually overflow your property and kill you too. You know that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So it's a so when in terms of I've been doing this worms thing since the early '70s when I started my business.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it, but the name Invisible Gardener fits in really well with the real invisible gardeners of the soil. These are the invisible gardeners of the soil. And you heard about the let's see I think it's a story of the invisible gardener or it's a poem or it's a
Yeah.
have you heard
Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Actually, you can look it up on YouTube and it talks about it.
Yeah, it's a parable of the invisible gardener.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but so what I think is important and it's part of what people should do, especially that you guys are doing all kinds of neat things. You want to make sure that you have both going. You have a good compost process, and you really, really, really want to get into the worm farming. I think my property is so rich, the neighbor's soil has improved through migration of the soil's life. Exactly that, and that's not a bad problem because if I was a neighbor, I would say, "Yeah, baby, bring it on." And as long as they don't do anything to contradict what you're doing, right? They're not using malathion or some chemical like that. So I would say, hey, brothers, fine. Just welcome to biology and keep it alive too. And hopefully they will come on board and say, wow, this is cool. The more biology growing, the better my property is. And the better the property is, the better I am. I can grow more food. I could waste. I don't have to waste so much water. There's no diseases and pests. Coming up on the shows, I will be. I'm working on 10 new shows, and so I have 5 of them already set up. 6, but I'm thinking I'm going to pick on some specific diseases and some specific pests of plants and animals. So if you guys have, okay, that's the end of the show. That's it. We're done. See you later. No, that's my atomic radiation detector. It goes like that when it reaches a certain level, and I only have 5 seconds to die. And so I think the time. Okay, guys, I have to.
I think you're enjoying that vibrating phone way too much, Andy.
But basically, people need to understand that if you have a worm farm, you're doing it to grow the worms, more and more worms, and the products they produce, as opposed to doing a vermiculture or basically even compost. Mainly, you're feeding it's a form of composting to process your food, and what you're gonna get out of it is slightly different than the reason why you do a worm farm is to make the lychee, to make the liquid, to make more of that liquid available to everybody, however way you want to do it. And I'm telling you, it's a really cool business. All you have to do, and you don't have to have a license to sell worm juice, and you don't have to say anything. Because you just say this stuff is good shit. Just try it, and that's all they have to do. And and there's no reason. In one of the shows, I haven't set it up yet because I am buying the beer making machine, and you can literally make a gallon of worm juice, turn it into 15 gallons of worm juice by using this beer machine.
Yeah.
You look in the microscope, you will not see any different. No different. You're gonna go, what the heck just happened here? So that's what you want to do. And you can literally sell that worm juice at a really good, decent price. It depends if you're like me. When I go out and spray people's property, I'm not just spraying the worm juice. I am spraying my super seaweed, which I'm not selling to the public right now, but only because I moved so many damn times. I haven't a faintest idea what, because it's like making yogurt. You got to be in one place long enough to make it. And on top of that, it's so biologically alive that the only way you can ship it is by getting it really super cold. You have to put it inside something and ship it overnight so you get it cold, because it will blow up on you if it gets too hot, or even going up in the air. I found out the biologist, my stuff does not like going up in the high altitude because the bottles would blow up. Figured that one out. The biologist go, what? So anyway. So when I spray at people's property, I make as much liquid biology as I can, but I also add my super seaweed to it, which is basically the microbiological activator. That's why I call it a microbiological activator. So if you're adding that to the microbiology, what does it do? It increases them. You have happier, and you aerate it, and the water's clean. You can make even more. So if I had 100 gallons of this, I would add maybe a gallon of my liquid, the worm juice. And I have a bubbler, and if I was to bubble it just 15 minutes, you would not tell the difference in that whole 100 gallons. It wouldn't be diluted. It'd be as strong as a matter of fact, there are different levels of bubbling that you want to attune to, it depending upon what type of diseases and pests you want to handle. Because if you bubble it another half hour, you'll be able to deal with even stronger. Because what are you doing? You're doubling the biology, more and more biology. And if you get it really like a super army of these little guys, you can sick it. Oh, the machine. You can sick them on. You can sick the biology on any other biology. And trust me, the good guys. Guess who wins between the battle between the good guys and the bad guys? 4 seconds.
The good guys, when you have enough of them.
Exactly right. If you have enough of them, that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's the secret to controlling all these diseases and pests. Overwhelm them with the good guy, and the good guys is totally harmless to you. You can drink that shit, it may give you diarrhea. Trust me, it will. And the machine the machine that I'm using is a really very simple machine. It's a beer making machine, and it comes in the form of a V shape. So it's a cone. It's a
Right.
cone beer making machine. I'll be happy to send you a link to one that I'm going to be buying from. And it's $150, 15 gallons. Or you can get 50 gallons or considerably more, because that's, basically it's making beer. But what we're doing, right, we're making soil beer. I just called it that now. This is the first time you guys ever heard this.
Okay,
Soil
soil
beer,
beer.
right? Soil beer for the soil. That's essentially what we're doing. We're making beer for the soil. Because actually, what is beer? Biology, right? Blah, 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 herbs and all this stuff, right? It's a biology that we're drinking, right? Which, by the way, beer is very, very good for. I wouldn't do. The problem, beer is actually, the biology likes beer if it was non-toxic. So the problem with beer, right? All the 76 different pesticides and chemicals in the beer that will kill the worm. But if you was to make your own beer, you can actually learn how to give the worms in the biology beer at a certain diluted rate, because all it is the fermented sugar.
Yeah.
Any fermented sugar product would be very good for the biology, provided you learn how to give it to them, because otherwise you will kill them, because overdo it, they'll be drunk, and you don't want drunk biology. So the machine is real easy to do. Just look up beer brewing, and then look under cone, CONE. See if they have a cone machine to brew their beer, because they realized a little while ago that if you percolate it with water, and you know how you have structured water, how it goes around in a circle, right? Well, this thing is a cone, a little cone that makes the water goes like that in a circle, a little vortex, right?
Yeah.
And right, and it energizes. They learned that it really does a nice job on the beer, but it also does a nice job on the biology. And so you're getting biology getting drunk and making bad decisions. Well, the whole thing is that they rely on us to make the right decisions.
Well, I like ghetto hippie here. Would wort be better than beer? I don't know. Is wort higher in biological content? Then yeah, it would
What
be.
is wort? What is wort?
It's a different ferment altogether. So
Any fermented product, as long
yeah.
as long as it's non-toxic, right? As long as it doesn't have any pesticides, herbicides, any of that stuff, you can use. You just have to learn how to properly dilute it. You can make you can ferment. You can make your own beer, and then you learn that. For example, I can. If I was making my own beer, I would put a gallon of the beer that I would make into my 100-gallon sprayer.
Yeah.
And the timing would be very important, but I would spray it in the beginning of the springtime, just when it starts to get warm. And I would not necessarily. It's okay to spray the leaves and the structure of the tree, but I would basically soak the ground.
Soil drench, yeah.
Soak the ground. Do that a few times. You'd be surprised how it speeds up the biology in the soil. You'd be surprised. There are lots of other fermented products, and when you think about it, what is a fermented product? Something that falls to the ground and ferments. Where does it ferment? On the ground.
And what happens? The biology consumes it, breaks it down,
right.
and just gives it back to the next
right.
generation of plants.
So all we do is bypass a couple of steps, got it to the point where it's already in a liquid form, and we spray it onto the soil, onto the plants. People used to think I was crazy because I would tell them I was spraying molasses, Granny Smith molasses.
Yeah.
Sometimes I would say, forget making the juice. I would just go out and buy like a gallon of Granny Smith molasses and spray it on people's property, blend it in my juice, liquid juice, because I would bubble it, and the molasses was this is like beer to the microbes, right? Beer to the biology, exactly right. They would drink this stuff, and if they're getting aerated air, oxygen is going through the water, right? And they would double, they would triple, they would quadruple. You'd be surprised. Blah blah blah. It'd be like a fractal system. And if they would only multiply to the limits, to the reach their limits, that they can't expand anymore, and then they would die rapidly. But they also go through different stages, and it depends on how you want to use it. So And that's really cool. Once you learn how to use this stuff, and you'll find too that you can learn how to. That's one of the things I think I'm going. So I probably, and I think I don't know how to remind myself, because the problem is I think of something good. We can talk about it later, but I also want to cover how to make your own liquids from various different items that you can grow or buy, like rice. You learn how to make it from rice. There are lots of other different. Uh, right now I'm making it from different kinds of quote weeds, and that's the other one I wanted to talk about. This I would think what's a weed. I think I already have that in there. That's one of the shows I want to talk about. Just don't know the title.
Yeah.
It has something to do with a weed by any other. You know how a rose by any other name is still a rose. A weed by any other weed still. The basic thing is not a weed.
No,
So,
it's an indicator plant.
Yeah, I don't want to say. Do you know what indicator plants are? Maybe we could do that. No, it's an indicator plant. I don't know. I'm trying to come up with a very clever title to basically say, these are not weeds.
These are the beginnings of life in the soil.
So, well, here I have certain weeds, and I feel that those weeds are bringing minerals up from wherever is on the ground, whatever is needed to the surface. I'm taking them. I'm saying, okay, great. I'm not going to cut you and throw you away. I'm going to cut you, say thank you, pull you out, roots and all, chop you up as best as I can, put you in with this nice liquid, and let you cook, and I'm going to put it right back out again.
Yeah.
And actually, I actually have a. I put it.
How about building blocks of your soil.
Right.
Weeds,
That's
building blocks of your soil.
Say that again. I missed something. What?
Weeds, the
right.
building blocks of your soil.
Yeah, and that's true, because the weeds are the first ones to grow. They will come up.
Yeah, because they won't grow, they won't germinate unless the Mother Nature has set them to germinate in those specific conditions. They just won't. A weed won't germinate. So if it's there, there's a reason Mother Nature has said, "Okay, you need to help fix this problem."
So I've learned over the years, when if I'm lucky enough to be in one place, the weeds stop growing. The different things will come up. I will always get volunteers. Tomatoes will volunteer. All kinds of vegetables and stuff will end up volunteering and growing all over places. Certain types of flowers. I love growing different kinds of flowers, medicinal flower, edible plants. The whole recycling thing is so cool, because, for me, you can't have a biological environment without animals. A farm is so important. What's having a farm without animals? Well, the animals are key to increasing your biology. Normally, the earth is surrounded with all these animals, right? So that's what we want to, like a Garden of Eden, where every animal on earth can live in, right? That kind of stuff, right? You think about that and say, that's cool. Every animal on the ark, right? Now that must have been so crazy compost he would be making, right? Right?
I would say I wouldn't have wanted to have been below decks on that journey. Okay,
but that would be
a lot of ammonia there.
Yeah, but it would have like such a blend of trace minerals from all different parts of the world. All the biology would be so different. So maybe that's how the whole biology got together. Maybe that whole ark thing is really about the biology, how the biology works, because that's why all these animals are the biology.
Well, they have the biology in them, and they have the genetic code for the biology they need in them, with the biology that keeps them alive.
So it's
all about the biology.
So what's missing is that they should have had somehow he should have had some soil they put in containers with them. That's what he should have done.
They must have had, or once the water receded, the biology that was anaerobic could live in or without oxygen would still be there. And then as soon as you release the animals, they start adding the aerobic biology, which was in their bellies, and it would just have to repopulate as the animals moved out.
Yeah, those were the good old days, guys. So we'll be here. And we have a whole line of people set up where I'm going to be getting some guests. I promise you, I'll be getting some guests, more guests to show up. I'm just really super, super, super busy, and these alien ladies keep taking me away. And I have all kinds of things happening. And so we'll see you guys next week. Thank you very much for tuning in and checking out my channel and my website. And normally at the end there, it'll say misswillgardner.com. But the kid is having such a good time these days. He's not. Thank you for the music.
There you go, Mr. Andy Lopez.
Great. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. God bless everybody. Namaste.
Peace out, guys. We'll see you on Monday.